They thought their story was over 35 years ago. Life moved on, families were built, secrets were buried, and time passed quietly. Then love came back asking one question. What if it was never too late for a second chance?
The snow fell grey over Manhattan, the kind of snow that didn't promise anything beautiful, just cold, wet misery that turned to slush the moment it touched pavement. Eric Brandon sat at his usual spot in Mulligan's bar, third stool from the end, watching condensation slide down his whiskey glass. The place smelled like stale beer and broken promises, dim enough that he didn't have to see his reflection too clearly. In the mirror behind the bottles, just a shape, a ghost of a man, 60 years old, silver-streaked hair that had once been the color of sand, pale blue eyes that had stopped looking for hope about a decade ago, settling instead into a permanent expression of tired disappointment. His face was weathered, lines carved deep around his mouth and eyes, a roadmap of everything he'd lost. The lottery ticket had made him a millionaire 3 years ago. $5 million after taxes. He'd thought it would change everything. It changed nothing. Tom, the bartender, slid the Times across the bar without being asked. Slow day. They're all slow days. Eric's voice came out gravelly. He couldn't remember the last time he'd said something that mattered. He unfolded the paper more out of habit than interest. The date caught his eye. It was 6 months old. He almost tossed it aside. What was the point of reading old news? But his hands moved automatically to the business section anyway. Old instincts died hard. He'd been someone once. Eric Brandon, commercial real estate developer. The man who'd turned a small inheritance into an empire. Tailored suits, corner office, handshake deals worth millions. Then 2008 hit. The memory surfaced unwanted, sitting in his office, watching his business partner's face as he explained they were finished, over-leveraged. The properties weren't worth half what they'd borrowed. Banks were calling in loans. It was over. Eric had fought for 2 years, worked 18-hour days, took out second mortgages, begged, borrowed, bled himself dry trying to save what he'd built. It died anyway. He took a long drink, letting the whiskey burn its familiar path down his throat. Jennifer had tried to stay. He'd give her that. For 2 years after the collapse, she'd held on, watching him unravel, watching him become someone she didn't recognize. When she finally filed for divorce, he'd signed the papers in the hospital, his hand shaking but not from emotion, from his first heart attack 3 weeks earlier. He'd been 44. The second heart attack came at 53, 2 days before Sophie graduated college. He'd missed the ceremony, been in the hospital while his daughter walked across that stage alone, her mother in the audience, her father too broken to show up. The memory still burned. Eric flipped past the business section, past world news, past sports. The obituaries waited in the back, printed small, easy to miss. He read them most days now, a meditation on mortality. A reminder that everyone's clock was ticking, not just his. His eyes scanned the names automatically, and stopped. Hayes Terrence Michael, 62, of Brookline, MA. The glass slipped in Eric's hand. He caught it, set it down carefully, his heart doing something dangerous in his chest. Not pain, something worse. Terrence Michael Hayes, beloved husband of Samantha, loving father to Dylan, Marcus, and Nia, passed peacefully on August 14th after a brief illness. Samantha, the name hit him like a fist. Beloved husband of Samantha. Beloved, past tense. Eric's hands started shaking as he read the rest. History teacher. Generous spirit. Survived by his wife and 3 children. He read it again, and again. Terry was dead. Samantha was a widow. Samantha was single. The thought came bright and terrible. After 35 years, she's free. Eric pushed the paper away, stared at his whiskey. His pale, weathered hands trembled against the dark wood of the bar. In the mirror, his reflection looked back. An old man, a drunk, someone who'd given up on everything that mattered. But underneath that, something else stirred. Something he thought had died with his business, his marriage, his second heart attack, hope. He pulled out his phone. The screen lit up, harsh in the bar's dimness. His contacts list was pathetically short. Tom, the bartender. His cardiologist. A few guys he used to drink with, who'd slowly stopped returning his calls. And Sophie. They'd spoken maybe 6 times this year. Awkward conversations full of long pauses, and things neither of them knew how to say. She'd moved to California with her mother when she was 12, come back to New York for college, stayed for reasons he didn't understand, working dead-end jobs, bartending, retail, whatever paid rent. 28 years old and drifting, and he knew that was somehow his fault too. But he called anyway. It rang again. He almost hung up. "Dad?" Her voice surprised, wary, like she was bracing for bad news. "Sophie, hi." His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. "I need to ask you something." Silence, then, "Are you okay? Is it your heart?" "No, my heart's, I'm fine. He looked down at the obituary, at Terry's smiling face in the small photo. The man who'd won. The man who'd gotten everything Eric had wanted. "I need your help with something." "What kind of help?" "I need to find someone, a woman I used to know." The words felt insane coming out of his mouth. "In Boston. And I want you to come with me." "Dad, what are you talking about?" How did he explain this? How did he tell his estranged daughter that he was about to drive 300 miles to chase a woman he hadn't seen in 35 years? A woman who'd chosen someone else. A woman who probably didn't even remember him. "There's someone I need to see," Eric said quietly. "Before I die. Before it's too late. You're scaring me." "Are you sick?" "Did the doctor? I've had 2 heart attacks, Sophie. Every day is borrowed time." He took a breath. I can't die without doing this. Without trying." He heard her breathing on the other end. Traffic sounds. She was outside somewhere. "Trying what?" Sophie asked. "To tell someone I love them. That I've always loved them. That I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to fight for them when it mattered." More silence. Then so quiet he almost missed it. "The woman from your stories. The one Mom said you never got over." Eric closed his eyes. He'd told Sophie about Samantha once, years ago, when she'd asked why he and her mother had gotten divorced. He'd been drunk, maudlin, and he'd said too much. Told her about a girl with eyes like midnight, and a laugh that made the world feel possible. A girl he'd loved and lost before he even knew what love meant. "Yeah," Eric said, "her. And you want me to come to Boston with you? To do what? Watch you get your heart broken again?" Maybe, or maybe he stopped. "Start over. Sophie, I know I haven't been much of a father. I know I let you down, let your mother down. I know you probably have every reason to say no. But I'm asking anyway. Please help me find her. Come with me." "Why do you need me?" "Because I'm scared." The admission cost him. "Because I don't want to do this alone. Because you're my daughter. And we've been strangers for too long. And maybe this is a chance for us to—" He couldn't finish. Sophie was quiet for so long he thought she'd hung up. "Then when?" "Soon, tomorrow, as soon as you can get here." "I have work. Quit. I'll pay you whatever you're making. I'll double it." "I don't care about the money, Sophie. I just need—" His voice broke. "Please," he heard her sigh. Heard her make a decision. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I'll come." 2 days later, Eric stood in his apartment, packing. The city was going quiet under the white blanket. Everything muffled and clean. Eric's hands shook as he zipped the bag. What was he doing? Driving to Boston to find a woman who'd said no 35 years ago. Who'd chosen Terry Hayes and built a life, a family, a whole world that didn't include him. Who probably saw him, if she remembered him at all, as a mistake. A moment of weakness she'd rather forget. But Terry was dead, and Eric was still alive against all odds. His phone buzzed. Sophie, at Penn Station. Be there in 30. Eric picked up his bag, looked around the apartment one last time. At the empty bottles in the recycling. At the lottery ticket framed on the wall. $5 million and nothing to spend it on that mattered. At the life he'd been living that wasn't really living at all. He turned off the lights, locked the door behind him. The Honda waited on the street covered in snow. Eric brushed it off with stiff, cold fingers, his breath clouding in the freezing air. The city hummed around him. Sirens in the distance, someone shouting, the hiss of tires on wet pavement. He got in the car, started the engine, let it warm up. Through the windshield, snow fell steadily now, accumulating, covering everything, making the world new. Eric gripped the steering wheel with his pale, weathered hands and made himself a promise. He would find Samantha. He would tell her the truth. And whatever she said, yes or no, love or rejection, at least he would have tried. At least he would have lived. The snow kept falling as he waited for his daughter, ready to drive into whatever came next. The car smelled like stale coffee and nervous anticipation. Eric gripped the steering wheel of his Honda, heading north on I-95 as Manhattan dissolved into rearview memory. Beside him, Sophie sat with her duffel bag wedged between her feet, staring out at the landscape rolling past, industrial sprawl giving way to stretches of winter-bare trees, snow melting in ugly patches along the roadside. February in the northeast was the ugliest season. Everything dead and waiting, caught between what was and what might be. They'd been driving for an hour in near silence, the kind of silence that happens between two people who don't know how to talk to each other anymore. Eric kept stealing glances at his daughter. Light brown skin, loose curls pulled into a ponytail, hazel eyes that looked so much like his. It hurt. 28 years old, and she'd grown up while he was busy drowning. "You look different," Sophie said suddenly. Eric glanced at her. "Different how?" Awake. She turned to face him. "I haven't seen you like this since I was a kid. Since before everything. Before the collapse. Before the divorce. Before he became a man who lived in bars and waited to die." "I feel different," Eric admitted. "Like I'm actually going somewhere instead of just running out the clock?" Yeah, the highway stretched ahead, grey and endless. A truck rumbled past. Eric merged into the right lane, letting faster traffic flow around them. His hands were steady on the wheel, steadier than they'd been in years. "Tell me about her," Sophie said. "About Samantha. Not the version you told me when you were drunk. The real story." Eric's chest tightened. "That's a long story. We've got 3 hours." So he told her about Samantha Williams, brilliant, beautiful, with deep brown eyes that saw right through, pretense and a laugh that could light up a room. About how she'd been dating Terry Hayes since their freshman year of college. How everyone knew they'd get married someday. About how Eric had loved her from a distance for 2 years, content to be her friend because being near her was enough. Then Terry cheated, Eric said, his voice going quiet. Some girl from his econ class. Samantha found out at a party, walked in on them. She was devastated. Sophie listened, silent. "She came to my dorm that night, 3 in the morning, freezing cold, crying so hard she could barely breathe, wearing my old NYU sweatshirt she'd borrowed and never returned." Eric could still see it, Samantha in his doorway, her natural afro dusted with snow, her smooth dark skin wet with tears. I'd never seen her like that. "So broken, what did you do?" I held her. For hours. Just held her while she cried and talked about how stupid she felt, how she should have known Terry would do this. And I told her she wasn't stupid, that she deserved better, that any man who'd cheat on her was an idiot. The landscape blurred past. Connecticut signs appeared, disappeared. Around 5 in the morning we stopped talking. Eric continued. "We were just looking at each other, and she kissed me." Sophie's breath caught. "I tried to stop her," Eric said quickly. "I told her she was hurting, that she didn't really want this." But she said, his voice cracked. She said she wanted to feel something other than pain, that she needed to know someone could want her, love her the way Terry didn't. "So we crossed that line." Eric's pale, weathered hands tightened on the wheel. "It wasn't just sex, Sophie. We made love. Slow and gentle and real. And afterward we held each other. And I thought maybe finally she saw me the way I'd always seen her. But she didn't. The next morning I woke up to her getting dressed, moving quietly like she didn't want to wake me. But I was already awake. I said her name and she just froze. The memory still hurt after all these years. She said, "Eric, this was a mistake. I was confused and hurting, and we shouldn't have done this. I tried to tell her I loved her, that we could be good together." But she was already shaking her head. She went back to Terry, forgave him. They got married few months later. Eric exhaled slowly, and I tried to move on. Sophie was quiet for a moment. "Then you married Mom. I married your mother 5 years after. Samantha's wedding." Jennifer was. She was different from Samantha. Steadier, calmer. She made me feel normal again, like I could build a life that wasn't about chasing someone who didn't want me. "Did you love her?" I did. Eric meant it. Not the same desperate, consuming way I loved Samantha. But I loved her. We built something good, Sophie. The business was thriving. We bought the house in Queens, had you? For 12 years, I was genuinely happy. Then what happened? Sophie's voice was gentle, but she needed to understand. Eric took a breath. Life happened. The market crashed in 2008. I'd made bad investments, over-leveraged everything. The business started bleeding money. I worked 18-hour days trying to save it, took out loans we couldn't afford, but it all fell apart anyway. And Mom, your mother was patient at first, but watching everything disappear, the stress, the fear of losing the house, it changed us. We started fighting about money, about the future, about things that shouldn't have mattered, but suddenly did. Sophie reached over, touched his arm. When did you start drinking? After the business went under. After we lost the house, had to move to that cramped apartment. After your mother looked at me one day, and I could see she didn't recognize the man she'd married. Eric's voice went hollow. The divorce wasn't about Samantha. It was about two people who couldn't survive what life threw at them. Jennifer deserved better than watching me give up. Eric's voice softened, but I'd think about Samantha sometimes, late at night, wondering if she was happy with Terry. If that night ever crossed her mind the way it crossed mine. You had a heart attack. First one came right before she filed. I was in the hospital when she brought me the papers. I signed them with a shaking hand, and I remember thinking, this is what failure looks like, complete and total. Dad, the drinking got worse after that. The loneliness, the emptiness, having nothing to wake up for. I lost my way, Sophie. I know I did. I became someone I didn't recognize. They drove in silence. Signs for a rest stop appeared ahead. Let's stop, Sophie said. I need coffee. And we need to find her. The rest stop was depressing. Fluorescent lights, stale donuts, truckers hunched over bad coffee, but it had Wi-Fi and Sophie had her laptop. They claimed a table by the window. Outside, the snow had lightened to occasional flurries, but the sky remained heavy and grey, threatening more. Okay, Sophie said, fingers flying over the keyboard. Samantha Hayes, Boston area. Let's see what exists. Eric watched her work. This daughter he barely knew and felt a wave of gratitude. She could have said no. Could have told him he was pathetic. But she was here. Tell me what she was like, Sophie said, eyes still on the screen. Not just that night. Before. She wanted to change the world, Eric said. Studied journalism, dreamed of writing for the Times, exposing corruption, giving voice to people who didn't have one. She was so passionate about everything, social justice, literature, music. She'd drag me to poetry readings and protests and art galleries. Sounds like she loved life. She did. That's what I loved most about her. How alive she was. Like she was experiencing everything at full volume, while the rest of us were on mute. Sophie's fingers stilled. Found her. Eric's heart stuttered. Sophie turned the laptop. There on the screen was a Facebook profile. Samantha Hayes. The profile picture showed a woman in a garden, silver-streaked natural hair catching sunlight, her rich brown skin still smooth and beautiful. Those deep brown eyes looked at the camera with warmth and unmistakable sadness. Eric couldn't breathe. Brookline, Massachusetts, Sophie read. Works at Brookline Public Library. She clicked through. 3 adult children, Dylan, Marcus, and Nia. The names washed over Eric. Samantha had built a whole life. A family. A world he'd never been part of. Sophie kept scrolling. Last post was a few months ago. A memorial for Terry. She paused. Dad, do you want to read it? Yeah, she turned the screen again. The post was simple, devastating. Missing you today and every day. 35 years wasn't enough. Love you always, Terry. Below it, dozens of comments. People offering condolences, sharing memories, telling Samantha they were praying for her. She really loved him, Eric said, his voice barely above a whisper. That doesn't mean she can't love you too. Eric stared at Samantha's photo, at the evidence of grief in her eyes, the silver in her hair, the life lived without him. What if I'm too late, he asked. What if she's moved on, met someone else? What if she doesn't even remember? Dad. Sophie's hazel eyes met his. You drove this far. Don't stop now. She clicked back to the profile, scrolled through photos. Family gatherings. Samantha with her children. Samantha at the library. Samantha and Terry at someone's wedding. His arm around her waist, both of them smiling. A life. Complete without Eric. There, Sophie said, pointing to the screen. That's her address. Or at least the town. Brookline. We can find the exact street when we get there. Eric's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against the table. She's a librarian, he said. She always loved books. Then that's where we'll find her. Sophie closed the laptop. But first we need a plan. You can't just show up at her work or knock on her door. That's creepy. Yeah. Eric ran a hand through his silver-streaked hair. I don't know what I'm doing, Sophie. I don't know how to do this. You figure it out when we get there. She reached across the table, took his hand. But you're not doing it alone. Okay? He looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw strength he didn't know she had. Saw Jennifer's steadiness mixed with his own stubborn refusal to give up. Okay, he whispered. Outside, the snow continued to fall lightly. Eric stood. Sophie packed up her laptop. They walked back to the car through the cold air, and Eric felt something shift in his chest. Not fear, not hope exactly, purpose. For the first time in a decade, he was moving towards something instead of away, toward possibility instead of oblivion. He started the engine. The wipers cleared fresh snow from the windshield. Ready? Sophie asked. Eric looked at the highway stretching north toward Boston, toward Samantha, toward whatever came next. Yeah, he said. Let's go. They pulled back onto I-95, leaving the rest stop behind. Snow dusting the windows as they drove deeper into the unknown. 2 weeks had passed since Eric arrived in Boston. 2 weeks of winter, slowly loosening its grip on the city. The snow had melted, leaving behind patches of dead grass and mud. The sky had shifted from relentless gray to occasional pale blue. And now, in early March, the first signs of spring were pushing through. Crocuses in purple and white, brave and stubborn, breaking through the thawing earth. Eric stood at the window of the small rental house on Beacon Street, 2 blocks from where Samantha lived, and watched the transformation. The morning light was pale, filtered through clouds that couldn't decide whether to rain or break apart. He'd been here 14 days and still hadn't approached her. You're stalling, Sophie said from the kitchen table, where she sat with her own coffee, her laptop open to job listings she wasn't really reading. I'm preparing. You're terrified. Eric turned from the window. His daughter sat there in sweatpants and one of his old sweaters. Her light brown skin still creased from sleep, loose curls pulled into a messy bun. She'd been patient with him, but he could see her frustration building. What if she doesn't want to see me? Eric asked. Then you'll know, and you can stop wondering for the rest of your life. Sophie's hazel eyes were gentle but firm. Dad, you didn't drive 300 miles to stare at her house like a creeper. He'd done exactly that yesterday. Walked past her place, a neat 2-story colonial with yellow, siding and a garden that was just beginning to wake up. He'd seen her briefly through the window moving around inside. Just a silhouette, but he'd known it was her. His heart had seized in his chest and he'd kept walking. I saw her yesterday, Eric admitted. At the library. Sophie's head snapped up. You what? I went to the library. The one where she works. I sat in the reading section and just watched her. He felt pathetic saying it out loud. She was helping an elderly man find a book. She was so patient with him, so kind. Her hair is different, silver now, natural. She wears it short, and she has reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Did she see you? No, I left before she could. Sophie closed her laptop with a decisive click. Okay, no more of this. Today you talk to her. I don't care how, but you do it. Sophie, no, Dad, you have 2 heart attacks behind you. You don't know how much time you have left. None of us do. And you're wasting it being scared. She stood, came to him, put her hands on his shoulders. Go find her. Talk to her. The worst that happens is she says she doesn't want to see you. But at least you'll have tried. Eric looked at his daughter. This woman he barely knew, but who was giving him courage he didn't deserve. Okay, he said. Okay, the coffee shop was called Brew Moon, tucked between a bookstore and a yoga studio on Harvard Street. Eric had noticed Samantha stop there on her way to work. He'd seen her through the window yesterday morning, ordering something, laughing at something the barista said. He felt like a stalker. He probably was one. But he pushed through the door anyway. The shop smelled like espresso and cinnamon, warm and inviting. A handful of people sat at small tables, students with laptops, a mother with a stroller, an old man doing a crossword puzzle. Rain had started outside, light and misting, making the windows fog. Eric ordered a black coffee, his pale, weathered hands shaking as he handed over bills. The barista, a young woman with pink hair and kind eyes, gave him a concerned look. You okay, sir? Fine, just cold. He took his coffee to a table by the window, sat down, tried to look casual. Tried not to watch the door like a man waiting for his execution. 10 minutes passed, 15. Maybe she wouldn't come today. Maybe she'd gone straight to work or called in sick or... The door opened, and there she was. Samantha stepped into the coffee shop, shaking rain from her coat, and Eric forgot how to breathe. 58 years old, and she was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Her rich brown skin glowed even in the grey morning light, smooth except for laugh lines around her eyes and mouth. Her silver-streaked natural hair was cut short, elegant, framing her face. She wore a navy blue coat, jeans, comfortable shoes, and when she turned toward the counter, he saw her profile, the curve of her cheek, the graceful line of her neck, and he was 25 years old again. Completely and hopelessly in love, she ordered, and the barista said something that made her laugh. That laugh, God. That laugh he'd carried in his chest for 35 years. It started deep and spilled out unguarded and real. Eric's coffee cup rattled against the saucer. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Samantha turned, waiting for her drink, and her eyes swept the cafe, and stopped on him. For a moment, nothing. Her deep brown eyes registered a stranger. Moved on, came back. Narrowed slightly, widened. Recognition hit her like a wave. Eric? His name in her voice, hoarse, shocked, disbelieving. He stood, nearly knocked over his chair, caught it. Hi, Samantha. She didn't move. Just stood there, one hand pressed to her chest, staring at him like he was a ghost. Maybe he was. What? She swallowed. What are you doing here? Having coffee. It came out stupidly, and he wanted to kick himself. The barista called her name. Samantha collected her cup, some complicated latte. But her hands were shaking now too, he noticed. Her darker, steadier hands that he'd once held, once kissed, now trembling as she wrapped them around the paper cup. She crossed to his table slowly, like she was approaching something dangerous. Please, Eric gestured to the empty chair. I should go. I have to get to work, please, just 5 minutes. Samantha looked at the door, at him, at the rain streaking the windows. Then she sat. Up close he could see everything. The silver threaded through her hair like starlight. The faint scar above her left eyebrow, that was new. The way her deep brown eyes held sorrow now. A weight that hadn't been there before. But also strength, survival. You look good, Eric said, and immediately felt like an idiot. You look old, Samantha replied. Then her hand flew to her mouth. Eric, I'm sorry. I didn't mean no, you're right, I am old. He tried to smile. 62 heart attacks. More grey hair than brown now. I read about your lottery win. In the Times, few years back. Small article. You kept track of me. No, she said it too quickly. I just saw it, coincidence. They sat in silence. The coffee shop hummed around them. Conversation. The hiss of the espresso machine. Rain tapping the windows. Two people who'd once known each other intimately. Now strangers with a chasm of years between them. I read about Terry, Eric said finally. I'm sorry. Samantha's jaw tightened. Are you? You two were never friends. The accusation hung there, sharp and true. No, Eric admitted. We weren't. But I'm sorry you lost someone you loved. Her eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back fiercely, took a sip of her latte, used the moment to compose herself. 35 years, she said quietly. We had 35 years together. 3 children. A good life. He was a good man, Eric, I'm sure he was. He was a better man than... She stopped herself. Samantha looked at him directly then, and he saw everything in her deep brown eyes. Old anger, old hurt, old love that had nowhere to go. I know this is strange. Me showing up now, Eric said. I wanted to see you, to know you were okay. After 35 years, you suddenly need to know if I'm okay. After 35 years, I'm running out of time to pretend I don't still. He stopped, reined himself in. Too much, too fast. I'm running out of time. Samantha studied him, really studied him, took in his pale, weathered face, the lines carved deep around his mouth and eyes, the way his hands trembled even when he wasn't holding anything, the evidence of a hard decade written in his skin. You've been drinking, she said. It wasn't a question. I'm not anymore. Been sober 2 weeks. 2 weeks. A ghost of a smile. What happened 2 weeks ago? I read Terry's obituary, and I decided to stop dying and start living. The words landed between them like stones in still water. Samantha's eyes searched his face. Eric, what do you want from me? Everything, he thought. Your time. A chance to be who I was before life broke me. To see if what we had that night was real or just grief and loneliness colliding in the dark. A walk, he said instead. Tomorrow, just a walk. We can talk or not talk. Whatever you want. I don't think that's a good idea, please. The rain picked up outside, drumming harder against the windows. Someone opened the door and cold, wet air rushed in. Samantha pulled her coat tighter. Why now, she asked. Why show up now when things are finally? Her voice broke. I'm sorry. I know the timing is terrible. But Samantha, I'm 60 years old. My heart is giving out. I don't know if I have a year left or 5 or just months. And I couldn't. He had to stop, breathe. I couldn't die without seeing you one more time. Without telling you that what happened between us mattered. That you mattered. A tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it away angrily. It was one night, Eric, one mistake. Was it a mistake? Yes, but she didn't sound sure. Then take a walk with me tomorrow. Prove to yourself that it meant nothing. That I'm just a ghost from your past who needs to be laid to rest. His pale blue eyes held hers. One walk, Samantha. Then I'll leave you alone if that's what you want. She was quiet for a long time. Outside, the rain softened to drizzle. The world blurred and clarified behind the wet glass. One walk, she finally said. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. The public garden. Thank you. Samantha stood, gathered her coat, her coffee. She looked down at him, and something in her expression shifted, softened. You really have 2 heart attacks behind you? Yeah, then take care of yourself, Eric Brandon. I don't want your death on my conscience, too. She left before he could ask what she meant by too. Eric sat alone at the table, his untouched coffee gone cold, and pressed his shaking hands flat against the scarred wood. Through the window, he watched Samantha walk away in the rain, her figure growing smaller and smaller until she disappeared around a corner. Tomorrow, the public garden. 2 o'clock. He had one chance to get this right.
What would you do if your first love returned after 35 years?
The public garden was waking up. Eric arrived 15 minutes early, found a bench near the lagoon where swanboats sat dormant, waiting for warmer days. The willows were beginning to show green, tender new growth against dark branches. Tulips pushed up through mulch in disciplined rows, red, yellow, pink. The air smelled like thawing earth and possibility. He'd barely slept, had stood in front of the bathroom mirror that morning, studying his pale, weathered face, wondering what Samantha would see. An old man chasing ghosts, someone who should have stayed in the past. But at 2:03 she appeared. She wore jeans and a soft green sweater that made her rich brown skin glow. Her silver-streaked hair caught the weak sunlight. She walked toward him slowly, carefully, like she was approaching something that might vanish if she moved too fast. Hi, Samantha said. Hi, they started walking. No plan, no destination. Just 2 people trying to find their way through 35 years of silence. I haven't been here in years, Samantha said, looking at the lagoon. Terry used to bring the kids here when they were little. Dylan loved the swan boats, her husband's name, her children, the life she'd built without Eric. Tell me about them, Eric said. Your kids. Samantha's face softened immediately. Dylan's 35, social worker in Dorchester, works with at-risk youth. Marcus is 30, teaches high school English. And Nia, my baby, she's 24, in medical school at BU. You raised incredible people. Terry and I raised incredible people. The correction was gentle but deliberate. They walked past the bronze statues, the memorial plaques, the flower beds just beginning to bloom. A jogger passed, earbuds in. A woman pushed a stroller, the world continuing around them. Why are you really here, Eric? Samantha asked. He stopped walking, looked at her, those deep brown eyes that had lived in his memory for decades, now watching him with something between hope and fear. Because I never stopped thinking about you, he said, and his voice cracked on the words. 35 years, Samantha, and I never stopped. Eric, I know it sounds pathetic, obsessive even, but it's true. He ran a hand through his silver-streaked hair. After you married Terry, I tried. Samantha, I tried to move on. I married Jennifer, built my business, had Sophie. And for a while I thought I was happy. Maybe I was. But there was always this empty space, this question of what if. Samantha's eyes filled with tears. You can't put that on me. I made my choice. I'm not putting anything on you. I'm telling you the truth. For once in my life, I'm being honest about what I feel. They started walking again, slower now. The noon sun broke through clouds, warmed their shoulders briefly, disappeared again. That night, Samantha said quietly. And Eric felt his chest tighten. I've thought about it too. More than I should have. It wasn't wrong, Eric said. What we did, it wasn't wrong. It was a betrayal. Of Terry betrayed you first. That doesn't make what I did right. Samantha stopped, turned to face him. Tears streamed down her cheeks now. Eric, I came to you because I was broken. Because I needed someone to make me feel like I wasn't worthless. And you were so gentle with me, so kind. You treated me like I was precious. You were precious. You are, but I used you. Her voice broke. I used your feelings for me to make myself feel better. And then I threw you away the next morning like it meant nothing. It meant everything to me, I know. And that's what I've carried all these years. The guilt of knowing I hurt you, that I broke your heart when you'd done nothing but love me. Eric reached for her hand. She let him take it, her darker fingers trembling in his pale, weathered ones. You want to know why I really went back to Terry? Samantha asked. Why? Because I was terrified of what I felt with you. She looked up at him, and the raw honesty in her deep brown eyes took his breath away. That night, it wasn't just comfort, Eric, it wasn't just physical. When you held me, when we made love, I felt something I'd never felt with Terry. Something so real and so big that it scared me to death. Eric's heart hammered against his ribs. I was 23, Samantha continued. I'd been with Terry since we were college freshmen. He was my whole world, my whole plan. And then one night with you showed me that maybe everything I thought I knew about love was wrong. That maybe what Terry and I had was just habit, comfort, not real passion. So you ran. I ran. Because admitting that would have meant blowing up my entire life. It would have meant admitting I'd wasted years on the wrong person. That I'd been lying to myself. She wiped her eyes with her free hand. So I went back to Terry, convinced myself that what happened with you was just grief and confusion. That my feelings for Terry were real, and what I felt with you was just temporary insanity. Were you happy? Eric asked. With him? All those years? Samantha was quiet for a long time. They'd reached the edge of the garden, stood looking out at the street beyond, at people rushing past on their way to wherever. I was content, she said finally. Terry was a good husband, a wonderful father. He never cheated again. He loved me, provided for our family, made me laugh. We built a good life together, but there were nights when I'd lie awake next to him and think about you. Wonder where you were, what you were doing, if you'd found someone who made you happy. If you ever thought about me. She squeezed his hand. And I'd feel so guilty, because I had everything. A husband, children, a home, and I was still thinking about a man I'd been with for one night. I thought about you every day, Eric whispered. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. Because it makes everything harder. Samantha pulled her hand free, wrapped her arms around herself. Eric, I'm 58 years old. My husband has been dead for 7 months. My body is falling apart. I have arthritis. I need reading glasses. I wake up 3 times a night. I'm not the girl you remember. I'm not the boy you remember either. I'm 60. I've had 2 heart attacks. I've got more pills than hope most days. Eric moved closer. But I'm here. And you're here. And whatever time we have left, doesn't it deserve to be real? Doesn't it deserve to be happy? What if I lose you too? Her voice was barely a whisper. What if I let myself love you and your heart gives out? What if this is just borrowed time? Then we'll have whatever time we get. Eric reached up, gently touched her face. Isn't that better than nothing? Isn't living really living worth the risk? Samantha closed her eyes, leaned into his touch. I'm scared, she said. Me too. They stood like that for a long moment. 2 people who'd spent decades apart, now close enough to feel each other breathing. One more walk, Samantha said, opening her eyes. Tomorrow, and we'll see. The walks became daily. Over the next 2 weeks, Eric and Samantha fell into a rhythm. Morning coffee at Blue Moon. Long walks along the Charles River. Watching the city wake up around them. Conversations that lasted hours, covering everything and nothing. They talked about their children. Samantha showed him pictures. Dylan at his college graduation, Marcus on his wedding day, Nia in her white coat at medical school orientation. Eric showed her pictures of Sophie. Admitted how much of her life he'd missed. They talked about their bodies betraying them. Eric's damaged heart that required a pharmacy of medications. Samantha's knees that ached when it rained. The way sleep became elusive, the way memories became sharper, while the present grew fuzzy. They talked about regret. "I should have fought for you," Eric said one afternoon, sitting on a bench overlooking the river. "After that morning when you left. I should have shown up at your door, told you I loved you, refused to let you go back to him. I wouldn't have chosen you." Samantha said gently, "Not then. I wasn't ready, and now?" She looked at him, really looked at him, at his weathered face, his tired eyes, the evidence of a hard decade written in every line, but also at something deeper, at the man who'd driven 300 miles to find her, who'd waited 2 weeks to approach her, who looked at her like she was still the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "Now," she said slowly, "I think I might be." Eric's breath caught. "I'm not promising anything," Samantha continued. "This is complicated. My children don't know about you, about our history. Dylan especially." She stopped, something flickering across her face. Pain maybe, or fear. What about Dylan? Nothing. Just he was very close to Terry. This will be hard for all of them, seeing me with someone else. She took Eric's hand. "But I want to try, if you're willing to be patient, if you're willing to let this be slow." "I've waited 35 years, Eric said. "I can wait a little longer." Samantha leaned her head on his shoulder. They sat like that as the sun moved across the sky, as joggers passed and dogs barked and the river flowed steadily onward. "Eric, yeah? Thank you for coming back." He kissed the top of her head, breathed in the scent of her, something floral and clean and utterly Samantha. "Thank you for letting me," he whispered. The city hummed around them, alive with spring and second chances. And for the first time in a decade, Eric felt his heart, that stubborn muscle, beat with something other than just determination to keep going. It beat with hope. Spring bloomed fully across Boston, and Eric and Samantha bloomed with it. April arrived with apple blossoms drifting through the air like confetti, warm breezes carrying the scent of things growing, golden light stretching longer each evening. The city felt alive, awakening, full of promise. Eric and Samantha stopped holding back. They had dinner at her house, just the two of them at first, testing what it felt like to be together in the space she'd shared with Terry. Family photos still lined the walls. Terry's reading glasses still on the side table. Samantha watched Eric take it all in, searching his face for judgment. Eric paused at a photo of Samantha and Terry on their wedding day. "You look happy," he said simply, and meant it. She'd cried then and he'd held her, and somehow it felt right, honoring what she'd had while building something new. They went to concerts at the Hatch Shell, walked the Freedom Trail like tourists, had coffee in North End cafes. Samantha introduced him to her favorite bookstore, where she spent hours browsing. Eric took her to a jazz club, remembering she'd loved Coltrane. They talked about everything. The future and fears of fading time, their children, and the weight of parental guilt. The strange gift of finding each other again when they'd both thought it was too late. And one night in May, sitting in her garden under stars, Samantha said, "I need to tell you something. Something I've never told anyone." Eric's heart kicked against his ribs. "Okay." She took a shaking breath. "When Terry and I reconciled after that night with you, we made love within days. Maybe 2. 2 days after you and I, she stopped, gathered herself. I got pregnant. Found out 1 month later. The world tilted." "Dylan?" Eric said. "Dylan." Samantha's deep brown eyes glistened with tears. "We got married quickly. Had him 8 months after the wedding. Everyone assumed we'd just been young and impatient. Samantha, I never knew for certain if he was Terry's or yours." The words tumbled out like she'd held them for 35 years. "The timing, it could have been either of you. And I never wanted to know because asking the question would have destroyed everything. My marriage, my family, Dylan's sense of who he was." Eric couldn't speak. His pale, weathered hands gripped the garden bench. "Terry loved him from the first moment," Samantha continued, her voice thick with emotion. "He was Dylan's father in every way that mattered. And I told myself that was enough. That biology didn't matter. That some questions were better left unasked. But you thought about it sometimes." She wiped her eyes. "When Dylan would smile a certain way or tilt his head. He has blue-gray eyes, Eric. Terry's eyes were brown. Mine are brown." I explained it away. Recessive genes, Terry's mother had blue eyes. But sometimes I'd look at him and wonder. Eric turned to face her. "Does Dylan know that you were with someone else?" "No, I never told Terry either. It's been my secret. My burden." She met his eyes. But if we're going to do this, really do this, I can't keep secrets anymore. Dylan deserves to know the truth. What if he's mine? Then he's yours. And we'll